William Crawley with Talkback on BBC Radio Ulster.
Welcome back, everybody. Just turning 7 minutes past 1. The Student Union at Queen's University says a food bank they run has seen a surge in the students that are using it. They call it the pantry, and the pantry at Queen's offers food as well as household items. So you might get some shampoo there or toothpaste, the sort of stuff my mother used to put in a box when I went to college, and I would carry it with me to university. But students are struggling these days, and the Student Union says a rise of around 20% in a year means that more than 10,000 students have used it. Now, this is a key question for us. In 2026, why are university students using food banks? Whether it's one like the pantry run in the Students' Union or other food banks near the university like South Belfast Food Bank where you can get a referral from the Students' Union and go there a number of times. Why are students doing that? Why do they need to do that in 2026? I know the world has changed. When I was a student, we got full grants. I never had more money in my life, I thought, because I came from a working class background, had no money, and I got a grant. It was an incredible transformation. Things have changed. People live in loans these days and have to do a lot more work alongside their student activities. But really, food banks for students in 2026. How do you explain that? 03030 80 55 55. We'll take your text on 81771. This is Holly Dugan, who was on Good Morning Ulster this morning, a final year law student at Queen's, talking about why the food bank pantry is such a vital service.
I know of a few people, they think that the pantry is an absolutely fantastic facility, which it is. It's something that is set up in a way to cater to all students for as long as possible, and just to sort of maintain the stock. It runs at staggered times throughout the week. Yes, speaking as chairwoman of the Women's Students Association, I hear a lot from the student body, and from that I hear people who have to rely on it rather than use it as a sort of additional facility. It's got a great utilitarian use. So
that's Holly Dugan there. Holly Dugan. We'll pick up the phone. Tell us what you make of this news. Students are in need of food banks. In this day and age, 03030 80 55 55. Text 81771. If you're picking up the phone incidentally, remember you're not coming forward straight to me. Don't worry about that. You'll chat to one of our team. They'll have a wee word with you. We'll get you all comfortable and then come on the radio for a minute or so it doesn't have to be overwhelming. What could possibly go wrong? Tell us your experience and also what you make of this development about food banks and students that's been developing over a few years now. Ben Friel is with us, president of the NUS-USI, which is the national union representing all university and college students here. Paul McCusker, the independent councillor, is with us. Paul, you will know, I'm sure, is the founder of People's Kitchen in Belfast and tax consultant and so much more besides. Felicity Huston is in the student. It's been a while since we have been students, Felicity.
I would admit
but
that.
Things have changed a lot since your day and mine.
They have, yes, absolutely. Like yourself, well, I had a grant and I got a certain amount of grant. My mum and dad topped it up to the level that everybody's grant was. One of the big things that was very different in our day was that everybody lived off the same amount, whereas nowadays I think parents struggle actually to where I can remember this with our son, trying to work out how much you're actually supposed to top up the loan, how much they're supposed to borrow, and I think that sometimes causes problems. But I have to say the thing that made my life easy at university was I was a vegetarian. I still am, been a vegetarian for 45 years. And if you want to live cheaply, stay away from those nasty artificial meat rubbish that they produce in Tesco's and so on, and cook from first principles. But then the other problem, of course, is I think in schools nowadays they don't teach cooking, do they? I did notice in the Students' Union website, I've done my research, is that you had a handbook on basic cookery, and I thought, isn't that actually the most useful thing they could do?
Well, I don't know what people do these days. I was in a house with 4 other students, and we took one day a week, and you were responsible for cooking that night. You went out and bought some things and cooked. Mine was terrible. I mean, some people would do spaghetti, some people do baked potato. You know, frankly, it was like I'd buy a chicken pie and put a potato beside some. It wasn't very adventurous, but we ate. Yes, how do you explain this, Ben? What is going on with the students?
Look, the student financial situation is dire, and as you both kind of touched on, it's not the same as it was in generations gone by. I think when we're talking to students on the ground, it's really clear that students are struggling. When we do surveys all the time, and we talk to students pretty much constantly, but over a third of students have reported skipping a meal due to not being able to afford it. And look, this isn't skipping a meal like it might have been. It might have been back in the day to go out on a night out. It is skipping a meal to be able to afford to put on the heating in the winter. It is that dire. The student support situation has massively affected every student's experience, and student unions have had to really step up to the plate with things like the food pantry. And we see this right across all student unions, whether that be at Ulster or even in lesser budgets. When you look at FE colleges, they do things like warm winters where they provide free meals for students. So look, this is a thing we're seeing with students right across the board.
Don't a lot of students at Queen's actually still live at home? And an awful lot go home at weekends. I mean, when I went to university in England, so, it was 10 weeks and that was it, and you didn't get home. I was very envious of my friends who maybe went home once
you could pop home.
You could pop home.
I mean, they often say Thursday's the last day of the week for students at Queen's. Is that true?
Does that not help? You go home to mum, and does she not help a wee bit with that sort of problem?
Yes.
If you have a mum.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I know.
It depends on the student, doesn't it? So, of course, everyone's thankful that those that have the availability of mum and dad, but also we have lots of students here that are struggling, and they're from Great Britain across the water. They're from down south. They're international students, but also even those that do have the luxury of going home to mum and dad at the weekend, it's still that burden of transport's expensive. How do I get home? It's still a cost to get home, to go eat that quote unquote.
So I understand that students have the same experience as the rest of us in terms of rising food costs, rising energy costs. That war in Ukraine, the knock-on effect of it. COVID had a knock-on effect and all kinds of things. Rising rent, really quite significant rise in rent for some students.
Absolutely, and some rise in rents in really poor living conditions as well.
But your student loan says the same throughout the year.
Yeah, student loan had a recent increase, but that was just to match inflation. Other than that, when you look at it in a broader picture, student loans still lag behind inflation. So when we're talking about housing, there's two types of housing. You have the purpose-built student accommodation, which is them really fancy buildings you might see in places like Belfast, but they're unaffordable, especially the private ones. So there's that, which is unaffordable and inaccessible to most students. But you also have HMOs, the Holy Land houses, which are mouldy and expensive as well. So look, there's lots of costs for students.
I used to live in one of those.
Right, who's staying in these big fancy places? Because they're throwing them up everywhere, and I mean the private sector.
They may be charging 600 to 800 quid.
Somebody
for
must
one
be,
room a
because
month.
you don't build those things if you haven't got the customers. So who's staying in them?
Well, Mickey in Belfast here says on a text, the university area is rammed with parked cars.
Oh yes.
Yes, cars to be bought, taxed, insured and maintained during the week. Plenty of spaces, weekends and summer. I was a student in the 80s. No one had a car, nearly no one. So please tell some truth. Some students are struggling financially. I don't think the claim here, Mickey, is that every student is struggling financially, but there has been a 20% increase here on these figures. Andrew also said this is nothing new. Students have always been skint. I certainly was in the 90s when I was a student. I had to go out and get evening work and relied on parents to normal part of student life. You know what, Andrew? It wasn't always that way. When I was a student on a full grant, my mother was a cleaner, my father drove a forklift truck. I wasn't getting any financial top-ups whatsoever from my parents. But my grant provision then gave me more money than I ever had, and I didn't need to have a job. I could focus on being a student. That's how different it was back then to what it is right now. It is very different. Getting a first or second job is normal.
In a recent survey we've done, we found that almost 70% of students have part-time work alongside full-time study, and that's
just normal now.
Yeah, it's so normal. And actually, part-time, if you're only part-time, you're considered a luxury. Most people have full-time work alongside full-time study. Like, we talk to so many students in that situation. So
yeah.
I think some of the things is, and also what I kind of touched on earlier is, we might have been skint to be able to afford to go out, but students aren't going out anymore. All you have to do is ask the hospitality sector, and you see them struggling, and that's a direct correlation to how much money students have in their pockets.
I want to bring Paul in on this point, just from the perspective of what you see in people's kitchen, and indeed what you know, Paul, from the other sort of ecology of food banks around Belfast and other places where we have students. Are you noticing an increase in students coming and saying, can I get some help?
Good afternoon, William. Yes, and we recently did a bit of work with Queen's medical students where they're doing some training with our team as well, and a lot of their students also echoed that issue as well with access and support for food banks. And we run evening times where we provide dinners, and we actually have seen a number of students present weekends and throughout the week as well, access and support for a sit-in dinner and struggling. A lot of students we work with from the Ulster University as well as Queen's, and it certainly is becoming a bigger problem of students who quite often present in crisis. And one thing for me is that quite often a person presents in crisis, but there's a massive dependency now on food banks where some of the students that we've been supporting have had to come back time and time again. They talk about the increase in fuel costs, actually to keep your accommodation warm, to keep it, going to the supermarket to buy food has also increased too. So it's definitely crippling students. And also the accommodation costs too. William, I mean, talk about the nice apartments that we see in Belfast, but there's a lot of students who are also living in squalor conditions in some of the HMOs and some of the landlord properties across Belfast too, which cost a significant amount of money. So
yeah, we're talking about black mould this week and whether we need an AWAB's law in Northern Ireland. I certainly remember the kind of accommodation I had with just black mould everywhere, but we paid very little in terms of the rent. It was a private rental arrangement. I wonder how much of that's going on now, Paul, where students could be putting their health in danger actually to stay in some properties, but it's affordable.
It is, and quite often they're making that decision because of financially they're struggling. So that quite often they're put in these situations because of financial issues. And while Queen's has provided the pantry, which is fantastic, and the response from the university, but it certainly raises a lot of questions around. Where 5 years ago, maybe before pre-COVID, we weren't seeing this, but in recent years, the People's Kitchen were quite responsive around people requiring support. We've seen a massive increase, and we often also talk about the working poor too, William. I mean, people a guy last week walking off, he's working on a building site, and he was going back to his wife and a couple of kids, and he had no food. This man's working a full-time job, but actually had to come to our food bank last week because he was embarrassed of going home. So the working poor, the students having to make different decisions around. It's difficult being a student. The pressures of your studies and then this added pressure, certainly the fuel costs. But the biggest thing I've seen, William, is the amount of money it costs actually to keep your flat or your house warm.
Just keep the heat on. Yeah,
keep the heat on. That's what they're choosing between. We often talk about heat or eat. And as that other contributor did mention, is that people quite often are having to choose to heat their home rather than actually eat a meal.
We didn't used to have heat.
We lived in a cardboard box.
Exactly, I can do all that too. I'll tell you the realities after.
How big was your pothole? Did you have windows in your pothole?
When I graduated, I went to work in Coventry for the City Council, and I earned in a month what I used to get in a term for a grant. So I thought I was, absolutely flushed.
Yeah, and
I could even afford to have a very elderly second-hand car. But it was so cold in my flat the first summer that winter. Not so, obviously winter.
Well, it is Coventry.
I know, Ghost Town was made about it when I was there.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was so cold that winter that it froze on the inside of my flat in the kitchen. My kitchen was iced up, and I had a couple of gas heaters, and that was it. There was no central heating, so there was no price to pay because nothing could do to warm that flat. And that was, I do sound like that skit, but it was like that. People just didn't have central heating. I'm talking 40 years ago. We just didn't.
We don't want to go back to that either.
No, I know we don't,
right?
but there's also an expectation.
And remember, we're expecting these students to focus on their education and try to get degrees and diplomas and certificates.
I know, but you just go to the library when it's cold. That's what we used to do.
Gosh, I remember that. Yeah,
exactly. That's what you did.
Ben,
there's certain expectations now that
I've got to ask the question that Ben's come in prepared to answer, I'm sure. I'm just going to read out. It's a version of what people are texting. Booze, vapes, festivals, club nights out, travel, ski trips. To what extent are students taking the P? They're not using the letter P. They're using the whole word in these texts. To what extent are students taking the P really to subsidise all that other stuff? And it's good stuff. You're a student. You want to do all that stuff. But, you have to pay the price somewhere. So you walk into the pantry 2 or 3 times a week, you get a free lunch.
Look, ultimately, I would push back on that quite a bit. Obviously, look, there's still some students that are living that experience, which is fantastic for those students, and that's actually what we want. We want everyone to have that experience. I want people to be able to have money to go out to bars and go on ski trips and do all that, but that's not the reality facing students. When you have 10,000 people queuing for a food pantry, when I was 10,000...
Not 10,000 queuing, are there?
Well, not at once, but over the course of 4 months.
4 months.
How many actual people is that? Because you can come twice twice, 3 times a week.
Is there a limited number of times you can go?
So you're supposed you go 2 times a week, and you're limited on how many items you can take in that. But fundamentally,
is it just an honours code? They don't write. There's an honour code. They don't write down your name and say you've been twice this week already.
I'm not exactly sure. But what I would say is, the idea of people queuing for pasta and rice to be able to game the system, I think, is fundamentally flawed. The idea that I'm standing in a queue with people around, there is a stigma around food banks, and that's why Queen's have called it the food pantry in the hopes to alleviate some of that.
Or the refill station.
Yeah, so the goal is to be able to make it accessible to people, and the reason it is accessible to all students is because you don't want an interrogation of students as they're going up to the food bank. Do you actually need this? What's going on? So I think. But
if you're trying to do all of this on a budget, all this fun stuff along with the educational stuff, and there's a big sign effectively saying free food here, guys, you're going to stop, aren't you?
I not in my experience. Obviously, yes, I'm not denying there's probably a couple of students that do that, but my bigger point
they're
is,
the future entrepreneurs.
But my bigger point is why is there a food bank in a student union in the first place? There must have been a need at some point. Queen's and the student union would not fund a food bank just because. It's because there was food poverty that existed, so they built the food bank. They provide the pantry with food, and students that need to access it. I don't like I'm.
The sort of stuff they're going for is like toothpaste, some cereal.
Yeah, like basics. We're talking absolute basics. We're not going for a filet mignon. Like, it's not like we're not going for a steak. We're going for very basic. So even it's low cost stuff that students just can't afford at the moment.
Do you accept that?
Well, I do think there's a bit
Felicity.
of if I build it, they will come.
All right.
If you don't provide a food bank, they will manage anyway. And I mean, okay, I just don't. I also say if you're in financial difficulties, a banana, a can of baked beans, and a packet of pasta is not going to be the solution either. I do think there needs to be some education about how to manage your money, and that's not done anymore. In schools and things.
Yeah,
they don't do anything like that.
Unions do a lot of that work. So, like you said, using Queen's SU website, but also Ulster Students Union. It's a real thing that students have taken on,
and I need to learn it. And choice. You can't do everything, and you can't. I mean, the festivals is the one that well mentioned there. The price of those festivals, they didn't exist in our day. I can't believe them.
They did, actually.
Well, obviously not in my day. I was always
Glastonbury was around back then.
No, but it was... Well, actually, it stopped for a while. It was a 70s
music did
thing.
exist. People went to clubs.
And they went to clubs, yes. There was Rock City in Nottingham on student night. But there weren't all these things.
Are you saying that these students are just not managing their limited finances?
I think they're making
properly?
Different choices.
Okay.
There was no Deliveroo in our day, was there, Will?
Tell me about compound interest and how it affects student loans and stuff like that.
But it just keeps building up and up, doesn't it?
So their debts are going up.
Because there's interest charged on the interest. The balance, they add the interest onto the balance that you owe, and then they put interest on the balance, which includes the previous interest. And we're
producing a generation of super indebted graduates.
Yes, but I mean, I can't believe that it has taken this long for those who are having to pay their student loans back to notice this. When it first started, I thought, but that's compound interest. That's usury we're looking at here. They can't clear it. Of course, the argument is, well, it doesn't matter after 30 years, it's written off anyway. But it's actually a tax. It's not a loan. And it's a calculated tax based on how much you're earning. That's all it is.
I'd push back on that slightly, only because a tax...
She's defending you here.
I know she is, but to call it a tax simplifies it a lot. It is a tax, but it's also a tax that rich students can opt out of by paying their tuition fees up front, by the bank.
I see.
Yes, the really rich can do that.
I think it's a tax particularly on poorer students.
On poorer students.
Well, the ones who are earning money, I mean, you have to earn a certain amount. If you're scrabbling out with no job, you don't pay back. And now, of course, Reeves has frozen the limit thing, so you will catch more, just like the tax system.
So what's the solution here? I don't think anybody's Paul McCusker, I don't think anybody's expecting any government soon to say, let's go back to full student loans, right? I don't think anyone's reasonably expecting that. What is the solution to help these students have a decent, good life and a good experience at college, get a good education, and also be able to feed themselves?
Yeah, well, I mean, investment's all important on our students. I mean, how many stories have we heard recent times around students having to go elsewhere out of Northern Ireland because they're not getting the right support here, and that's a massive problem. There isn't enough investment, enough support for our students.
Fees are cheaper here. Their fees are lower. By half. I
think also in terms of the impact, I suppose, what hasn't been talked about, I mean, the impact going to a food bank, the mental health impact,
No, I get all of that, but what is the solution?
Well, the solution, I mean, I always say that a food bank is not the solution. I mean, I've always said this for many years.
But again, I'm sorry to be so focused on this. I want to know, politically, what is the solution to this? If we all accept that this is a terrible situation, what should be done about it?
Well, I mean, it's about, ongoing work with the students to make sure they're accessing, support around their finances, making sure there's financially more support in place for students, to look at that more longer term and preventing,
so handouts.
Well, I mean, there's more financial assistance around responding to students who are struggling. Handout, but it could be. I mean, there's a thing called discretionary payments. People can get, William, if they're struggling to buy white goods or live. So why not look at discretionary payments?
I don't mean handout to sound, like a criticism. I lived my student years on handouts, right? Yeah. We mean giving people money to help them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like a discretionary payment for students who are struggling so they don't have to go to the food bank and trying to get them out of that bit of crisis or situation that they're in. So more for that financial assistance, I think.
Well, what about Felicity's idea that there should be better food and cooking advice and also budgeting advice? Maybe this is the first thing you should get when you go to a college or a university.
No, that's important as well. I mean, how to manage finances, how to cook, the basic skills, because when you leave home, quite often as a young person getting into university, maybe they haven't got those basic skills of how to cook meals. And so that's all really important too, about that sort of life skills. But I think there definitely should be more support, financial support, because food banks, are quite often just a reaction to that situation. But the longer term support is about empowering people to actually go and buy their own food, to then cook their own food as well. So, I
wonder about the responsibility of the universities themselves. I mean, universities pay their vice-chancellors like £350,000, £60,000, £70,000 a year. More in some other universities. Some vice-chancellors in the UK are paid upwards of £600,000 a year. In the United States, some presidents of universities are paid $4, $5, $10 million a year. Could the university be doing more, universities plural, be doing more to give out assistance? Robert's on the line. Hey, Robert.
Hi, Ian.
What do you think, Robert?
Here's the reality. I heard somebody talking about they couldn't turn the heat on because of the financial situation.
Yep.
Picture our situation. There was a one coal fire, and the fireplace was a foot wide. And we were on the 3rd floor. And I remember the landlord saying to us, "Now, I don't want you closing the living room door because I want the heat to come from the 1 foot wide coal fire to travel up to the 3rd floor to heat us." There's reality.
There is reality.
Robert,
Thank you, Robert.
Oh,
my goodness. One wee fireplace and it's heating the whole building.
You must have shared a house with my husband who had a house in Jemison Street, and that's exactly
I love this poverty nostalgia, but it can't be a model for the future for our students.
That's what I was going to say. Look, that sounds like a really grim situation.
It does.
But let's not romanticise students living in poverty.
It's awful.
It's
awful.
It is a dire situation, and it's like when we tell these stories, it's like it's like a rite of passage, but it should never be a rite of passage. It should never
Don't
be
accept it.
No, I completely push back.
Do you think the universities are doing enough?
Look, Queen's have...
They're helping with the pantry.
Queen's have funded this pantry.
Yeah.
And the universities do what they can. I think obviously there's always more people can do. I don't think the universities themselves would actually deny that. Yeah. I do think there's a lot we can do to support students, and we need to explore all of the options.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. That was like contemporary experience when nostalgia rushes all at once. Felicity Huston, Paul McCusker, Ben Friel. You guys need to get a podcast together, older students and younger students. That would be fantastic. That is it for today. Thanks very much, everyone.